for justice and peace, in the use of democracy as a spiritual, in the everyday and the ordinary, and most of all, in being a community of spiritual journey persons. Let us begin with our singing bowl chime as we center our bodies and our minds into this hour of worship. What a lovely way to start the morning. Kathleen has graciously offered to light our chalice this morning. We gather in this space where there is enough warmth, and we give thanks for the warmth. We gather knowing that we have been able to turn on our computers or move our bodies from wherever we were this morning to arrive at the First Parish Meeting House or in front of our computers. We gather today feeling hope for the warmth or despair for the heating bill, or concerned about an irritating situation, or maybe with a disappointment or anger that woke up with you this morning. Perhaps we are putting our energy into trying to control all of life around us so that everything works the way we dreaming of lunch or breakfast, of encounters to come, or time alone in the woods, or snuggled up with a good book or a movie. Whatever arrived with all of us today, wherever we have been already in this day, we have brought ourselves here now, just for this hour, and perhaps for coffee and fellowship afterwards over in the parish hall. It is a time set apart. Here, we can remember or be reminded that we are loved by something larger than the very impatient salesperson or the ridiculous telemarketer or the grumpy face we met in the mirror this morning. Here, we are reminded that you and I are part of a larger we. We are not alone. Come, let us enter into this time, illuminating with this chalice light our connections, our we-ness, and the celebration of our connections to another cycle, the earth cycle that begins in this time of transition with the unseen deep in the earth preparing for spring's rebirth and the welcoming of new life as it happened up in my neighborhood in the warm hay of the sheep stalls this week. Come, let us shine like the flame as we worship together. Times of transition, be they seasonal or interim, call for us to pull together for literal warmth and for the warmth of knowing we are not alone. Our opening hymn was written in the early 1970s by Bill Withers, a musician from rural West Virginia. And it has become an anthem to our need for one another. Please rise in spirit, body, if you are able, and let us sing with open hearts and whole selves. Lean on Me, number 121 in the teal turquoise hymnal. You may be seated, or not. If you're still moving, just stay standing. Because we need one another to lean on. We call Renee up this morning to lead us in our response. Whatever color you'd like to call, oh, nope, never mind, I said teal silver. Silver, gray, hymnal. Number 468, we need one another.
We need one another. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and our best.
To accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat, when we draw mercy, united to the Lord, and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
I think that our Zoom congregants may be experiencing some difficulty at the moment because I hear voices. So let us hold them in our hearts because it's very frustrating to be on the computer, be able to hear everything that is going on. In our need for one another, we practice the sharing of joys and sorrows as a beloved ritual observed in our faith communities as an act of worship and of witness to the special moments of joy and sorrow in our living. We do this in the faith that a joy shared increases joy in the world. And tremendous joy. May it wave in our direction. Draw the circle wide. As we enter into a time of silence on this morning, let us do these words from Kristen Harper. The breath of life is not mine alone. I do not wish to breathe another breath if it is not shared with others. The breath of life is not mine alone. I brought myself to be with you, hoping that by inhaling the compassion, the courage found here, I can exhale the fear, the selfishness, the separateness I keep so close to my skin. I I cannot live another moment, at least not one of joy, unless you and I find our oneness somewhere among each other, somewhere between the noise, somewhere within the silence of the next breath. Let us enter into a time of silence and silent prayer to be with one another and breathe. Amen. One of the readings in our hymnal says, is a sacrament, because when our faith ancestors first gathered, church, and not the church of the state, which at the time was usually a king. And so this morning, we come to the time when we collect and here I offer my apologies to the worship team because I lost the list. So this morning, the half plate offering is going to go to the minister's discretionary fund, which is a bit low. So with a financial need, it would be nice to be able to meet it. So our half plate today only will go to the minister's discretionary fund. Gratefully receive your gifts for the financial workings of this congregation. And we hope that it is also gratefully given. And the choir will sing us into our giving with this wonderful song. And a slightly, because the composer and lyricist was writing to speak to her own African-American community. And so we've slightly amended some of the words.
She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up. She is not heavy. If I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, I will fall down. I'm gonna lift my brother up. He is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up. He is not heavy. If I don't lift him up, if I don't lift him up, if I don't lift him up, I don't lift. I'm gonna lift my father up. He is not. I'm gonna lift my father. Not heavy. I'm gonna lift my father up. He is not heavy. Lift him up. If I don't lift him up, if I don't lift him up, we're gonna lift her up. We are not heavy. We're gonna lift each other up. We are not heavy. We're gonna lift each other up. We are not heavy. If we don't lift us up, if we don't lift us up, if we don't lift us up, we will fall down.
This may be a morning heavy on history. Because both Unitarians and Universalists were Protestant Reformation traditions that based themselves not in Christian creed, but rather in the power of a covenanted community to walk in the way of together. Now, of was often the way of Jesus, the way of God, the way of love with a capital L. Capital L love is not that personal affection we may have for some. It is the value and principle embodied in the idea that each living human being has inherent worth and is worthy of compassion, of justice, is interdependent web of all creation along with each of us, and thus connected. We have in our hymnal 3 examples of covenants, many of them often used in our congregation. I believe it's also printed in the order this morning, and hopefully it will be in the chat online. This 471 was written by one of our ministers, L. Griswold Williams. And you'll see at the end in parentheses, "and with God," which is how it, not without the parentheses, is how it's written. But some congregations use it and some don't. So I invite us to read this covenant together this morning and just experience, to say this in a way that, if the congregation did it regularly, would be a statement of our values and our promise to one another and to ourselves. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in, see it says unfreedom, in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine, thus each other and with God. Lifting each other up is probably an ideal many of us carry in our hearts and our minds when we think about perhaps in most religious traditions, but particularly in our Unitarian Universalism. Love, said that covenant, is the doctrine. Lifting one another up is an expression of that love. Mutuality is a way of expressing that love that is spoken about both by Martin Buber, the philosopher and theologian who inspired the title for this morning, I and Thou. In a book he wrote about what it means to truly be in that love relationship with relationship is one of mutuality. Mutuality is a positive, interactive relationship between people, says vocabulary.com. It means, it goes on to say, there's good communication and a sense of understanding. When Buber talks about mutuality and relationship in I, thou, it's this idea of I, thou, as opposed to I, it. In I, it, other more as objects. And it's not necessarily always a human thing. It happens. We sometimes when we need one another, we need things from one another. So those things. I need a hug today. So the person on the other side might just be the giver of a hug. And that could be an it in the way. But when I need a hug, and we are in I, thou, as Buber expressed it, there is a deeper connection that happens in which my whole being and your whole being in the same moment at the same place. I haven't worked out the I didn't do well in science. But when I think about when I was reading it in seminary, it's a little bit like two material, love is not something corporal, but still I thought of it as two material beings occupying this same space, or two sets of energy occupying this one space. One of the ways in which Buber expressed this in his own words, when two, translated from German, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, electricity that surges between them. There's another way to think about God. Electricity that surges between us. And somehow I expect that hug has a different quality to it. You meet my need. And I don't want to dismiss that hug. It's important when we need it. And mostly that's what we get in life. But every once in a while, that electricity, that energy occurs. And we meet two full human beings. These two human beings were fully mature in ways that most of us simply never achieve. I think as just that aspiring to that wider and larger being in which we begin to both hold ourselves and lose ourselves at the very same moment, which is what Buber thinks about my understanding of the I-thou moment. We are fully present in ourselves. We are fully there with the other person who is not us. folks who are engaged in communication theory got excited about Buber's idea of I, thou, and on it, in which I am not very well versed, but it is an ideal of how we communicate and lift one another up. And like our conversations and use of the word beloved community, I, thou is an aspiration. It's not something we do. It's not something we can even engineer. But it is something to which we can aspire and work by the values and the principles and maybe even the covenant that moves us toward that kind of relationship. A faith community gathers because there is a purpose, a set of principles, a sense of values that we share. In our tradition, mostly expressed as being a covenant. A particular community does not have a covenant. I process at one point, and it just wasn't the time for you to find one. But perhaps in your future and your near future, you will try again to think about what are the values and the principles. How we live them together. What can we promise about learning to become onto our eyes, but they do not dominate. And we move toward creating, towards aspiring, toward that energy. L. Griswold Williams tells us in which we can do that if we create a covenant. We might want to notice that serving one another, serving the larger community. We heard this morning about Tracy Turner's service to both this community and the wider community around the giving of gifts. How do we learn to be a we in relationship, in mutuality, in conversation, and dwell in peace when we are going to have inevitable conflict? It's too, right? How do we be I and we? We learn how to have conflict. We learn how to have conflict in a way that is productive and builds community. Most of us, I think, would prefer to shy away from conflict. 'Tis easier to just nod our head and say yes and walk away. It's much harder to say, I don't see the world that way. When you talk to me about wanting to have sheep all over the yard here, but the person that you're talking about to sees life and growing reconnection with the earth and farming that reminds us of the seasons and the cycles. We see things differently. How do we stay in relationship, in mutuality, and hold our differences with respect. That's dwelling together in peace. That's the I thou that Buber envisioned, not one where everyone is. To seek knowledge in freedom, not in unfreedom. To seek knowledge in freedom. How do I learn what I need to know in order to find truth? And how do we support one another in finding different truths and still being a we? To the end that all souls, all of us, grow into harmony with the divine, however we define what is holy, and need not be a theist. One can be an atheist and hold that there is divinity, holiness, and sacredness in this world around us, within our being, within the life that came before, is within, and will come. What a covenant would call us to. Call us to this, we remind us that we are not just individuals who sometimes like each other and come together to worship on a Sunday or to do things together. On a set of principles and values and a vision for the world that is not yet here, believe we can build. Even see it. Each little step is a block in the building. With one another for the deepest and the best vision of who human we in this congregation can be, who we as Unitarian Universalists can be, and who our neighbors in the larger world can be. When we hold that love, we find ourselves inching toward that I thou, that very narrow ridge, as one person described it, where there is that electricity occurring between two solid eyes that is a we. May we carry that into our lives and our being. Amen. Our final hymn is from a small hymnal that the choir uses called the Songs of Grace. But this particular hymn, the church is more than framework. Might be the church is really about the covenant and trying to live it out with one another. The covenants that we make. It was written by someone just like you, a Unitarian Universalist, for all of her adult life, perhaps for all of her life. She was the mother of a colleague of mine. She wrote this years ago about the lyrics, about her experience of being in church and being in a covenanted community for all of her life. A place not unlike this meeting house in the South Shore, North Shore, Canton. I'm not really sure where that is. But, it was set to music by Grace Lewis McLaren, who was a member of the Brunswick, Maine congregation, and who now, I believe, lives out west. The words are printed in the order of service, or will. And if, Olga, if you could play it through once so we could all hear the tune and the chorus, and then let us sing together. Our benediction comes from Krista Tavs. It is our work shared with each other in covenant that creates and sustains our aspiration toward becoming beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us together, in our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and spirits. Amen, and blessed be.